And we're live.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. We're going to be firing it up in just a moment here. And in the meantime, we'll get the tin toys going.
We welcome you and we thank you for joining us on this Friday morning. I feel like this is the part where we should sing as we gather together. Oh, nothing. No, they could stick in these hands.
Advice from Fred.
Doesn't it feel good when you're just about to do something that you know is wrong and you decide to do something else? Something that won't hurt you or anybody else?
Yes,
Doesn't that
Fred.
feel great?
Fred's keeping the kids out of trouble.
My emergency room. All right, let's.
Shall we?
Yeah, I'm gonna cry this. Go ahead. Let's do this thing.
All right. This thing called blogging.
Vlogging.
Vlogging. Okay.
It's called many things.
We'll get to the 21st century eventually.
But we try to be.
Okay.
All good.
This is now Bridge to a Better World. I'm Tiresias. This is Ani Raven. And I'm glad you could join us. I hope that you will feel free to make lots of comments. And I want to thank you for your well wishes, too. I wasn't feeling so great last week. My spine wasn't cooperating, but I am back and meaner than ever. I'm feeling good, feeling peppy. Julia Conley writes, in Common Dreams, the Government Accountability Office surveyed federal agencies and found 10 has specific plans to increase their use of facial recognition technology by 2023, surveilling people for numerous reasons, including to identify criminal suspects, track government employees' level of alertness, and match faces of people on government property with names on watch lists. I can see a little criminal face right now making scratch marks on the furniture. The report was released as lawmakers face pressure to pass legislation to limit the use of facial recognition technology by the government and law enforcement agencies. Senators Ron Wyden and Rand Paul, an unlikely pair, introduced the Fourth Amendment is Not for Sale Act in April to prevent agencies from using illegitimately obtained biometric data, such as photos from the software company Clearview AI. The company has scraped billions of photos from social media platforms without approval and is currently used by hundreds of police departments across the United States. The bill has not received a vote in either chamber of Congress yet. There's more to that article by Julia Conley in Common Dreams. I want to comment that facial recognition tech, or FIRE for short, FART for even shorter, is already notorious in the courts for being used to accuse Black and Asian Americans of crimes they didn't commit. And it's obnoxious to think that our secret police agencies and our law enforcement agencies can have such handy reference to our faces, and that handy reference is quite possibly incorrect. I mean, what could go wrong, right?
It's not like the police have a track record of, or any of the government agencies have a track record of profiling or, say, using racist bias to target individuals. And I don't see any problems. There's no problems here.
Kind of thing. As the forests burn from Greece and Siberia and Brazil to California and soon to be Hurricane Ida approaches U.S. borders, the oil and gas industry is feverishly handing out money to its minions in Congress. Here's a list from Open Secrets in terms of who gets the most money. I think this is per year, but I could be wrong. Anyway, it's the first one on the list is Senator Jokin' Joe Manchin with $179,000. Kevin McCarthy, I'm going to correct that. I think this is from 2007 to now. Kevin McCarthy has received $113,000. Tim Scott gets $78,000 from oil and gas. Yvette Harrell gets $77,000. Kathy McMorris Rogers gets $69,000. Steve Scalise, $66,000. Lizzie Fletcher, Democrat of Texas, gets $65,000. John Kennedy in the Senate gets $64,000. August Pfluger, let's see, where was I?
August Pfluger.
August Pfluger gets $61,000, and Ryan Zinke gets $54,000. Here's Kenny Stencil's article on the latest giveaway, also from Common Dreams. He writes, progressive advocates are rebuking the Biden administration after it said this week that federal officials will soon resume selling new leases for oil and gas drilling on public lands and waters. And speaking for myself, this is the same Biden administration that is saying that they intend to cut emissions by 50%. And they have a plan for doing it, but then they do something like this.
Well, this is the same Biden administration that actually campaigned on we will not authorize any new, drilling and whatnot, who talked a pretty good game, fairly good game in the election, right? But here we are in the reality.
Yeah, and it's complex. I mean, this particular step is being forced by the courts at the moment. Robert Weissman writes in Public Citizen, while the administration's appeal is pending, Interior Secretary Deb Haaland, oh, you're trying to protect the microphone.
Yes, I am trying to.
Okay.
Yes, very much so.
All right. Let's see.
Well, you were talking about Deb Haaland,
Oh,
and,
yes.
and so this is the thing that, you were saying the judge's hand
should use their
has forced
discretion
it.
under the law to authorize the least amount of leasing required to comply with the court's order.
Right. That's Robert Weissman. He's the president of Public Citizen who said that. He also called this distressing news because, of course, when we're in the middle of this climate catastrophe, as we are, it's not the time to say, yeah, we're going to move forward with opening up more drilling. And that the court has ordered this, has backed the attorneys general. It's predictable and horrifying all at the same time that Trump-appointed federal judges are apt to do things like this into the foreseeable future. How do we respond to that, right? So how do we address the climate catastrophe, knowing that the federal courts are peppered with these appointed judges that are going to side with industry and with those that are furthering the catastrophe rather than those that are actually trying to do anything to stop it?
Yeah.
How do we get around the federal courts? Of course, Weissman says the first thing to do, he says the easiest steps to address the climate crisis is to stop making things worse. That sort of seems basic, right? While the administration's appeal is pending, as you said, he's advocating that they do as little as possible. But it's really a disappointing situation.
I know. And in the long term, I mean, the answer is to aggressively appoint judges while you still have a Democratic administration, which is just not the nature of a Democratic administration because what? Because they're just kidding about the things that they campaign on, I guess. And, but seriously, I think there is a greater fervor in the Republicans, maybe just because they get, more cash faster and more comfy jobs quicker than Democrats when it comes to corruption. But however it works out, I mean, the Trump administration under McConnell particularly jammed all kinds of judges through. And now we've got these right-wing bastards in place. And they need to be challenged. Many of them are corrupt and can be removed for their corruption. That needs to happen. And, none of that is happening right now. So I think we need to ask Democrats, when are you going to get serious about the things that people desperately need?
Well, especially, I mean, right now there's a hell of a fight going on around Line 3, right? There are the water protectors and this Line 3 that is furthering the petrol economy, furthering the old paradigm, furthering the way things cannot be, because we are obviously facing consequences, just the very beginning of them, right? And we could immediately stop arresting, stop hassling, stop torturing the heroes that are actually trying to defend our planet and protect the water, not to mention native rights. This is, the fact that the heroes are being taken off the land. Again, it's predictable, but that's a focal point that I think that we all need to put some more attention on.
I really agree. Despite Biden's 2020 campaign promises to ban new oil and gas leasing on public lands and waters, the Department of Interior plans to restart the leasing process as early as next Tuesday, putting the administration on track to hold a lease auction for the Gulf of Mexico as soon as October and onshore auctions early next year. And as I was saying, that all gets started just as Hurricane Ida hits. Changing topics now, the drug industry has been very generous to their fully owned representatives over the years, according to KHN.org, and it's a little ironic that I'm using that source. Senator Mitch McConnell has received over $1 million from Big Pharma since 2007. Since 2007, Pfizer Incorporated has contributed millions of dollars to hundreds of congresspersons, including in order of payola, Democrats, Representative James Clyburn, Senator Doug Jones, Representative Richard Neal, Representative Steny Hoyer, and Senator Gary Peters. There are plenty of Republicans, too. You can bet these Congress critters have nothing to gain by crossing their pharmaceutical gravy train drivers. And I want to say, whereas it's pretty much arbitrary at any given point in our history whether more of a given industry's bribes are going to Republicrats or Demopublicans, it might be worth noting that Republicans have been trained to hate the vaccine, presumably because it reminds the ex-president of his failure to deal with COVID. And Democrats were recently encouraged to think that they could be congratulating themselves for taking the jab, even if everyone else is going to be stupid about it. But it is and was stupid to think that the laws of evolution would stop at the borders of the United States. And that's why we have the Delta variant, the laws of evolution. The virus is using its vast international unvaccinated proving grounds to develop newer and less preventable forms of itself. Meanwhile, the U.S., which spends trillions of dollars on 1,000 military bases around the world, posing as the guarantor of global safety, is pretending that it doesn't have the moral or fiscal reserves to vaccinate the world. That is absolutely untrue. The wealth of the United States is vastly greater. It is easy. It is the amount of money necessary is really quite small compared to the reserves of the United States. And although there's no reason the U.S. would have to go it alone for the worldwide vaccination effort, the U.S. is capable of standing in the way, and that's exactly what we're doing. And please don't imagine that we are the first to realize that there will be a vast bonanza of cash awaiting the pharmaceutical industry if the world, due to this insufferable vaccination reticence, enters a new era in which neither the COVID variants nor the next plague is ever permanently eradicated. And that's a redistribution of wealth that absolutely rides on a plague horse. So it's time to let people and legislators know that we expect the USA to get on with worldwide vaccination. No excuses will be accepted. And I thought of rattling off the congressional switchboard numbers. There's a bunch of them, actually, I found that have been provided by nonprofit organizations as fee-free, 800 numbers. And so that's the old way of saying it, back when 800 was the only toll-free number. Toll-free was what I'm trying to think of. And you can find those simply by putting that into a search. Put in congressional switchboard toll-free, and you will find a list of maybe 10 different numbers that you can use to call them. And I would like for you to call them, and I will be calling Congress about climate change and about COVID and about these judges.
And these two things are really, they're the catastrophes that are actually taking place around us. They're the water we're swimming in. That we have this pandemic that is rolling on. Well, again, not surprising. We see historical examples of how pandemics operate. We see the influenza example from just over 100 years ago. But here we are with science behind us, right? And we have a lot of understanding that we've gained from the past pandemics. And we have this vaccine, right? That, as Teresa was saying, could be made far more widely available, far more quickly than is being made to the world. And that is to everyone's best interest, right? Except for those that want to profit, except for big pharma. So again, removing that profit motive is essential. I'm going to talk a lot about crushing capitalism, basically, because capitalism is crushing us. We know that, right? Whether it's being ground down through our work that's exploited, or through examples like this, where the profits are being held over people's lives around the planet, and the misery of pandemics move on to protect big pharma's profits more than anything else. That's unconscionable, and we need to talk about that directly. It's not just the horrors of COVID as a disease, as an infection. And there's a lot to talk about there too, but it's also, let's look at that underlying cause of one of the things causing this to drag on is the profit motive of big pharma. So just to tie it directly back into capitalism, the other thing I wanted to say about that is the complexity, is the behavior of a couple of the governors. There's this race of folks not making sense, right? To do this tough guy posturing. Do we want to talk about that now, or do you want to talk about that in a little while?
Well, I'd like to talk a little bit more about COVID.
Okay, yeah, that's exactly.
Okay.
Go right ahead. You do that. And,
although I'm thinking while you're saying that we're just so trained not to question the supposed right of the pharmaceutical industries to make a profit. People say, well, they have to make a profit. No, they don't. It's an emergency. We could nationalize them. We have the right to save our lives. That's a bit more important than billionaires making more billions. Given the fact that
But they want to go to space.
Yeah.
None of the pharmaceutical giants have gone to space yet. Don't deny them their rocket ships.
Ships.
Rockets.
Given the fact that the Delta variant is A, wildly contagious, R5 or something, and B, has infected record numbers of Americans, we all need to severally and personally undertake the most stringent steps to avoid the infection. Ani and I, for just that example, are canceling a trip that we had planned for early September. Double mask, disinfect your hands in public and private, keep your hands away from your face. I think I probably already failed on that this morning. Avoid just about everyone and limit public movements to the bare minimum. Also, remember that whereas this Delta variant is being described as a respiratory infection along with all its other qualities, it also has been determined to have far larger virus counts emitted from infectious persons. So one slip up could give you a tremendous dose. At least it is still true that vaccinated persons are very unlikely to die from it, but it can still make you sick enough to need hospitalization. And you can't necessarily get in the hospital right now, depending on where you're at, because so many people are being treated there. It's right back to a severe emergency now.
Yeah, it's, you read reports from really around the country of people being intubated on, I think this was in Florida, hospitals that were actually just intubating people on floors because they ran out of beds. How is this even possible, right?
Yeah, and we're still hearing stories of people being so far into denial with this Republican mania that started under Trump that they're, shouting abuse even as they are intubated and on their way to their deaths.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. It's, Melody, my old cohort who I started positively revolting with, she had a saying that was reality is when it happens to you, which is, it's easy to be in denial about something right up until the time that the reality of it hits you in the face. And the weird part of this, and something I really haven't seen so much before, is reality isn't really stopping that, right? Like there's still the denial of folks in the hospitals who are saying, well, it's really not so bad. And, or even worse, I've heard of some reports of patients saying that they're, possibly being made worse because these doctors are being paid to diagnose them with the COVID, and then they're giving them stuff to make them sicker. That has not been a prevailing attitude, but there are still people in the hospital going, well, it's just not that bad. I don't know. I'll be fine in a few days. It's incredible. It's incredible, the level of denial. And that level of denial is no accident. That level of denial has been propagated. It has been seeded by those that will gain from an extreme radicalization of the right in this country. There is an extreme radicalization effort going on, don't you think?
It's a cult, and we just have to deprogram these people somehow. It's
the first time in my life that I've seen that this extreme radicalization effort is actually coming from inside the house, right?
Yeah.
The call is coming from inside the house. That is, there's elected officials on the federal, many on state legislator levels, and several governors that are flat out anti-science, that are just trying to outdo each other with this sort of tough posturing and waging war on common sense and science through public health measures. There's the recent rally in Sturgis where, golly gee whiz, history repeated itself in South Dakota with Governor Noem, who is amongst those that I'm speaking of. There's Governor Abbott in Texas, who's been vaccinated, got COVID, and is still restricting, what's the word I'm looking for? Denying, stopping any kind of mask mandates.
Yeah.
Prohibiting is the word I was looking for. And of course, DeSantis.
Yeah.
In Florida. Go ahead.
In the past, the cults were small enough that you could get individuals and take them back to their families and say, look, this is, gravity still works and 2 + 2 is still 4. What do you do with a fifth of the population?
Exactly. And what do you do with those elected officials that I guess are representing that fifth while whipping them up into an anti-science, anti-democratic fervor?
I don't have that answer.
I don't either. We just have a lot of questions.
Well, let's see now. Were we about to talk about climate?
Go right ahead. Please.
Well, I want to say that, I could rattle off some more climate events, but I guess we've all heard enough of that right now. I just want to say that we have to prepare, once again, individually and severally, for the randomly distributed and deadly heat domes now. Not just for that, but for, evidently, rain events so severe they are almost incomprehensible. I mean, imagine 17 or even 20 inches of rain falling on your house. Where would the water go? I mean, if 1 inch of rain fell in a day here, I think that we would be in trouble. But these random events now are happening because of the increased capacity of the atmosphere to hold water because it is warmer. These events are stronger, and as I was saying, they're more or less randomly distributed across the globe. We don't know where it's going to hit next. The continental United States actually is prone to storms generally anyway, always has been. That's statistically so. This is just a stormy part of the world. So we can guarantee that there will be more events like this, like what happened in Tennessee, where the water was just so voluminous and so fast that it was smashing cars, smashing houses into each other as it carried them away. I mean, the pictures are just shocking. So now
as they were shocking in Turkey a couple of weeks ago, as they were shocking in Germany a couple months ago, as they've been shocking around the world in places that have not necessarily been flood prone.
Yeah. So, for example, we will be raising our generator, but you have to think about those things now, well before they hit. If there's anything you can do about it at all, I don't mean to exaggerate. And then, there's a lot of people who are renting or maybe even don't have a place and aren't going to be able to do anything about it. But if you can, now's the time. And I also want to say that the same energy and the same moisture will drive extreme winter events. We haven't seen that yet.
We kind of have. No, we have. I will remind you about the cold snap in February that Ted Cruz flew to Cancun to escape, as well as around here, many people were out of power for 5 days. Really intense ice storms. I know it was a long time ago. February.
I just hadn't thought about it in the same frame.
February is like years ago at this time. In Dog's years, it's a whole nother life.
And that seems counterintuitive because we're talking about global warming and winter events are going to be worse. But
no, we're talking about catastrophic climate change.
Yeah, and it is the heat that does it, but in a roundabout way.
Yeah. Oh gosh, there was something there. Not to get us entirely away from catastrophic climate change, but you were saying maybe you're a renter or maybe you don't have a house and there's not much you can do about it. But if you can do something, I'm going to say we need to do more. And we need to actually make sure that if you are a renter or if you don't have a house, that you too are going to be better cared for than we are caring for people right now. And so that's why it is imperative that we really start, that we address the issues of houselessness. Portland's houseless community has really exploded in the last few years, and we are seeing so much vitriol pointed at those that are being devastated, pointing at the economic refugees that are living on the streets.
Nothing like blaming the victim to get around your own personal responsibilities.
And again, it's capitalism crushing us, and we need to take this very seriously to City Hall and say, in the face of increasing climate disaster, in the face of heat domes and 100-degree days and weeks of 90-degree days on end in Portland, which is most unusual, which we know is going to be followed by a very harsh winter if past is precedent. And why wouldn't it be at this point, right? We know that these things exist. And then there's the COVID crisis as well. What is being done to address the needs of the houseless? What is being done to address housing prices in Portland? What is being done to address housing prices across the country and these issues nationally? But let's look at where we have the most power, and that is regionally and locally. And we really do have to make these changes that we've all, for 20 years, 25 years, 30 years that Teresa and I have been doing broadcasting and commentary. We've said, these are issues and we really have to do better to take care of them. We really have to do better to take care of them, right? The crises that we've warned about are coming into, I won't say come into a head, because again, I fear that we're just seeing the very beginning
Well, I don't know.
of what is to come.
Yeah, at the very beginning, I agree. Although, I think a lot of people have got that feeling that the agricultural byproduct has hit the oscillator.
Indeed. But it's to say that I expect that it is going to be so much worse. And I'm the optimist in this couple, right? But it's going to be so much worse. So please let us reach out and try to actively uplift each other and make sure that those of us without homes are also being cared for. And I have a little more on that. Actually, I should have mentioned this during the COVID segment. Sorry, but just to drive this point home about taking care of each other a little more, I came across a comment on Twitter from a doctor who mentioned that this week he dealt with a patient who, for the very first time, was actually learning the facts about the coronavirus, was actually learning about this for the first time. Why? Because this person was experiencing both houselessness, and they are a person who is deaf. And so this is like being houseless is isolating. And being in the deaf community while you're houseless can be very isolating. They had not received the information. They had not heard the news, right? And so having an ASL interpreter for this healthcare interaction was essential. And the person was, gratefully taking the vaccine that they hadn't had before because they hadn't realized it was important because they hadn't had the information. We have to do better at taking care of each other. We have to remember there are people in our communities who don't have the same access to information. And then we have to take care of the reasons why folks don't have access to the same information. Do we need more interpreters? Do we need access to information delivered in different ways? Are we over-reliant on this internet to provide access, knowing that there's a huge part of our population that don't actually regularly access the internet? How do we reach people, and how do we actually bring us together to be informed so we can make a better future together?
It's cooperating. Cooperating is the way to get through these crises, of course, and not the survivalist, toxic individualism that's selling so many, meals ready to eat. I could go into details about the Waverly floods, but I think I've already made that point that we will see more and various types of extreme events. So that pretty much, I've run through the content that I was intending for
I wanted
this morning.
to maybe talk a little bit about the war, and I'm talking about Afghanistan. I'm not one who is going to, I don't think that we should, in fact, be there. We shouldn't. Teresa and I have spoken out quite soundly around the fact that we should have no business having invaded 20 years ago.
We are one of the 11 million across the globe who protested that war.
There's so much that we've said over the years. I don't think we need to say more about why that war was unjust and why it was a war for imperialism and really not for anything else in the U.S.'s interests, let's just say. I know that there have been some advances in women's rights. That's important, and I'm not going to downplay that, but that's not why the U.S. was there. Okay. So is there any honor in that war? Not really. And so now we're out. Okay, we're out. War done for imperialist values is not honorable ever. I'm glad that we are getting out after 20 years of travesty. And those same hawks that have promoted the war are the same people that mainstream pundits are going to now to get comments on our evacuation, on us leaving. And it's just, to me, this, again, makes no sense. It's like, you got us into this, and now you're going to talk about how it was a huge mistake and Biden's exodus is the biggest disaster of all, when it was you ignoring 4 to 8 years of intelligence reports in the past that have kept us there. It's the hypocrisy of it is mind-boggling. It's frustrating. It makes me want to scream a lot. That said, we are completely responsible for those that we have left behind. And this is really a super serious situation. We have thousands of Afghanis who are in serious danger because they cooperated with us. They believed the vets, they believed the soldiers when they were told that we would take care of them, that we would make sure that they were protected and safe, when they interpreted for our troops, when they provided services for our troops when they interacted with our troops in public. Okay, we have to take refugees. AOC appeared on the Joy Reid show recently, and she talked really movingly about the need to raise the cap of refugees. Nearly 70 Democrats have sent an open letter to the Biden administration saying that we must raise the immigrant cap to 200,000 to deal with the humanitarian crisis that is Afghanistan right now. She talked pretty movingly on the Joy Reid show about being in 6th grade with a boy called Keith, who turned out to as a teenager. 7 years later, he joined the military. He went to Afghanistan, and he wrote her last week. They had not kept in touch, and she suddenly was there remembering this 11-year-old named Keith, who's now writing to her, some 20 years later, asking for her help, begging for her help as an elected representative, as a Congress member, begging her to get his friends out of Afghanistan. Because when he was stationed there, he made promises to the people that were working with him. And he is devastated at the thought of what is happening to those people right now. And here we have AOC and the progressives in Congress standing up for human rights and standing up for those that have been devastated by the war that the centrists and the alt-right have elongated, have caused, and have advocated. So I wanted to bring that up. Ilhan Omar, who is herself, of course, a refugee from war, says that her office alone received 5,000 calls in the last week, 5,000 requests from people trying to get family members and colleagues out of Afghanistan in the past 2 weeks. 5,000 calls or requests in the past 2 weeks. That's representing tens of thousands of individuals who are afraid for their lives. She said yesterday's terrorist attack on Afghans and U.S. service members is another reminder of the terror of the people of Afghanistan continue to face daily. She says that we should not let paperwork and bureaucracy be a death sentence, right? Get the people the fuck out, and we can figure out the paperwork later. This is devastating, and we need to act as though it is the humanitarian crisis. It is. Lives are on the line, and in huge part, we are responsible directly for those lives being on the line. For background and more information on this war, I want to refer you actually to Flying Focus Video Collective. The Flying Focus Show, I believe, is the name of the channel. Last June of 2020, I spoke with Zahir Wahab, a local professor, about the situation in Afghanistan and the war and efforts to end the war. And there's a 2-part interview that I have put on a playlist on this channel, on our channel. You can check it out also on the Flying Focus Show channel and check out their other video offerings. Teresa and I have both worked with them for some time. They're great people with really good, important information there in their archives. So I wanted to mention Afghanistan, to plunder and turn our backs on the people after we've either colonized or decided that we're just pulling out is the American way. But I demand that it's time that we do better, right? We are supposed to have learned something from our past. Let us demand that we actually behave in a way that is human towards each other, and that we actually acknowledge we have responsibility for each other and each other's well-being.
A decade ago, Julian Assange, who was against the Afghan war at its inception, said that the intention wasn't actually to win the war, but to keep it going because it is so obscenely profitable. And in fact, trillions of dollars have been funneled into the defense industry to the point that they are now even more hegemonic in the society than they were before. And one may not utter the word imperialism without making people jump. And that's why, of course, they are threatening Assange. That's why they're prosecuting Assange and trying to throw him in jail forever, is because he has opposed the U.S. imperialist policy of dominating the world. You're not allowed to think about that, not allowed to say it without the intimidation of the example of Julian Assange. Putting Assange in the hole forever is saying directly to you, well, is saying indirectly to you, almost directly, we could get you too. Just watch your mouth.
It is an assault to journalism. It is an assault to First Amendment rights.
Yep.
And in a way that so many things are not an assault to First Amendment rights that folks claim. Mask mandates, not an assault to First Amendment rights. Okay. What else? There has been a lot going on. I quickly look at the time. Oh man, we wanted to make this short and sweet this morning, and yet here I go. Just a little bit more local. That is, I think, it has ramifications for everyone. This week, of course, last Sunday saw the coming to town of a bunch of white supremacists, the Patriot Front and Patriot Prayer. There were folks coming to town to hassle, to marginalize, to attack marginalized communities.
And to directly threaten trans people.
Tiny did that when he was speaking at their gathering. We know they've terrorized people of color and people in the LGBTQ communities when they have come here before. And so they were met with anti-fascists, as they have been when they have been here every time. Portland, though, officially requested that, we just ignore them. Ignore them. Ignore fascists. They'll go away. Ignore the fact that Tiny, who has warrants out, is taken to the mic talking about how he's going to kick trans ass, should he come across this, right? That this is an open threat, and advocating that other people do the same. But the city's response, just don't fight. It just causes problems. It just makes them madder.
I just have to comment.
It just makes it worse.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, we see the city, Wheeler taking the side of the cops. Finally, he seems to be taking a side, and we see where he lands by engaging in this policy in which there is a sort of public both sidesism, while the actual effect and intent of the hands-off policy is to say to the fascists, okay, come in here and punish people for being leftists, punish people for being anarchists, punish people for being against the police. And this goes hand in hand with the current unnamed but very effective and ongoing police slowdown strike, which is resulting, of course, in all kinds of unmitigated crime, everything from gun violence to speeding on the streets, while the police pretend that the slight reduction of their funds, which was always in great excess of their actual needs, is resulting in this mayhem. Basically, we're being abused into going along with whatever the police want. We're being beaten over the head by the police, and people need to realize what's actually going on.
So it was an incredible action. There was a lot of violence done in East Portland, Southeast Portland, Northeast Portland, sorry, around 122nd and Sandy, Skidmore area. There was a lot of damage. There was a huge confrontation out there for some time with the police adamantly not involving themselves, right? Adamantly not involving themselves. To the point, and I'm going to give Willamette Week a lot of credit. There's an article there that tells about a Chevron employee calling 911 and asking for help because folks were shooting off fireworks and throwing, stuff that was flammable in the direction of the gas station. Right? This is not brilliant. And this worker was afraid. I think kind of rightly so, that something might happen, something might start burning, something might explode. And after trying to get this across to the 911 dispatcher, who kept saying, yes, the police are aware that there are protests in that area, they are monitoring the situation, they're choosing not to involve themselves, and being met with silence from the caller for about 3 go-rounds, the 911 dispatcher ultimately responded by saying, and I quote the Willamette Week article, if anything happens, like if anything does catch a spark on your property, you can call us on 911 and we can send help. Police at this time are not intervening. End quote. So, I mean, tell me how that's any kind of an appropriate response to fascism and the actual threat against trans people and the historic threat that these groups have brought with them against the LGBTQ and people of communities of color. Tell me how that's an appropriate response, first of all, period. And then furthermore, tell me how that's an appropriate response to a worker saying that they are afraid for their business, which has tanks of flammable fluids in the middle of some protests where folks are finding it a good idea to throw flaming projectiles.
They're saying, hey, Portland society, you should think twice before you tolerate left dissent. And the appropriate response from the governor should have been to call the National Guard under this emergency.
Yeah, Portland's response, Mayor Wheeler, decided, I guess, to get a big LED sign downtown that said "Choose Love."
Yeah, it's cute.
Because that's going to help. That'll stop. Choose love. I'm just going to put it out there. Total recall. So there is a recall effort for Wheeler. Time to move that on.
I wonder if Wheeler would be putting out that sign on his property if the Chuds were coming after him.
He doesn't actually like it when anyone confronts him in public. People have been doing that at bars on the regular because it seems he's been taking a drink lately. Just saying. If Twitter has anything to say about it, I have noticed. By the way, you can follow us on Twitter. We are there at Bridge2 Utopia. Bridge2 Utopia on the Twitterverse. You can follow us all week long.
I'm going to poke my nose up here and look at comments.
Okay, well, while you're doing that, I am going to maybe just move ahead and, all right, I'll do that. Let's wrap up. I have to mention one more thing in the wrapping up, and that is the extreme stupidity that is Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson has long raised my attention as one of the more stupid people to comment in the media. And it's, that curious puppy dog look he gets on his face, that when
Oh, that is such a put on. He's an Ivy League graduate.
I know.
Look, I'm dumb like you.
I just don't understand a thing.
I knit my brow at these things.
And so the latest brow knitter for old Tuck is the fact that our Governor Brown is bisexual. First of all, how her sexuality affects the public health mandates that are being issued from the state, how those things intersect, I really don't know. I don't get that. Why he has to mention her sexuality at all? Well, we know it's a dog whistle to discredit her because he's still counting on people being homophobic as hell in 2021. And the fact that there are people that are going to be homophobic as hell in 2021 grieves me, but it is the case. And so there he is speaking to his audience in that confused puppy dog kind of way, because Governor Brown is bisexual and married to a man. Now, he finds this confusing. He says he doesn't understand how this works. I'm not sure what is confusing old Tuck about this. Bisexual, by definition, means you're attracted to either gender. Now, in my world, we've moved on and we recognize that there's more than one gender and gender can be fluid. And so the new term is pansexual because maybe, non-binary gender and gender non-conforming folks also need to be included in the gender spectrum. So there is more than bi. All right, so we've actually moved our language forward, and many people that have considered ourselves to be bisexual in the past consider ourselves to be pansexual now. I always wanted the word omnisexual to take off myself because, I don't know, it has more pizzazz, I think. Pansexual, I feel like I should be like running after satyrs in the woods or something.
Can't help but think of those little Dodge cars that they made in the 70s.
Omnis? They were cute. Oh, no, that's not what I meant. Anyways, I digress. This reminds me uncomfortably of really trying to explain my right to be bisexual in the queer community for years. This also reminds me of trying to explain my right to be bisexual in the straight community for years. I haven't really been a part of the straight community, but whenever I have sort of looked at somebody who seems to be a gender not mine, to get those approvals and accolades from straight friends and families, like, you're okay now, right? Again, says that folks don't understand what it is to be attracted to more than one gender, or to not particularly care about the gender of the person you're attracted to. And I want to put it out there that if you, like myself, have faced this kind of harassment, have faced this kind of stupidity, the non-understanding of folks like Tucker Carlson on the other side of the fence, or even friends and family who just don't get it, I hear you. It's frustrating as hell. And all I can say is be true to yourself, be true to your fabulously queer self. No matter who you are with, you are. You are the bi, you are pan, you are omni, you are who you are. And that's a beautiful thing. Fuck the bigots, fuck the haters, and fuck those who don't understand that one can be in a committed relationship, and that committed relationship will have a gender, but that your attraction can in fact be to more than that one gender you've ended up in a committed relationship with whom you've ended up in a, I'll work on the grammar of that sentence later, but you know what I mean. Anyways, I just want to put that out there because I saw that and I saw our governor's response. And Kate Brown, often not, she's been doing good on masks. Okay. A little centrist, perhaps, for my taste, we'll say. But I was very heartened to see her response. It was very clear. It was unequivocal. And it was uplifting for those of us who are in the queer community that are attracted to all genders. So thanks, Governor Brown. And I did want to mention, folks are commenting that there was a lot of damage done, by the alt-right this weekend. Cops stood by while they overturned cars. Cops stood by while they attacked cars that were driving by because they were full of Antifa, whatever that means, right? What's the implications of that moving forward? I just want to pick up on those comments and say those implications aren't good moving forward. So how do we address that? And we need to demand that our city officials step forward and have a plan for when these attacks happen again.
Well, yeah. I mean, we've got
Okay.
got to root out these fools, and
And so with that,
no time like the present.
indeed, about this thing called tarot. My tarot reading for this week, for the collective, for those of us together here watching, and those of us picking up on this video for this week. Here's the energies that are out there. I got the I used the Cat Tarot deck, and got the cards of the Magician, the Four of Pentacles, and the Two of Swords. And this is basically, to me, a big sign for it's a week for balance. Really checking in with ourselves and seeing how we're doing. Check in with each other, for that matter, and see how we are doing. Are we actually paying attention to our feelings, our emotional selves, our physical selves, our mental selves? How's our mental health and stress levels, depression, mania? How are we doing overall? How are we feeling? Are we despondent and brokenhearted? Are we, how are we taking care of ourselves emotionally? How are we taking care of ourselves physically? How's our will and our connection to source? How are we grounding? When we actually balance these things, which is not to say we have to be doing great in all of them, we just have to be paying attention, right? We have to be paying attention to these aspects of ourselves and making sure that we're really treating ourselves well. Because when we do, we can be as whole as we can be in this moment. We can access the most power that we have, and we can access more of our strength. And that's super important right now, right? It's super important to be grounded and able to react in a grounded fashion, in a creative way that may be off script. It's important to be fully tapped into our creativity, because we really have to find our answers. As Teresa and I have noted, we have many questions. We don't have a lot of answers. We have a lot of questions. So together, staying grounded and staying connected to our creative sources, we can help each other find those answers. We might have some epiphany moments. We might have some breakthroughs. We have to, one of the things that's really, and that's sort of all coming from the Magician card here. One of the things that can help us do those breakthroughs is some good mental analysis, some good intellectual analysis, applying really critical thinking skills, and check it out, really trying to see things from other perspectives. I know I've often said, it's like, I don't really need to know how they're coming up with these conclusions. Well, I might be wrong. I actually probably do need to know how the alt-right are coming up with these conclusions, or how those that are talking about the vaccine causing a mass die-off in 2 years and how it's sterilizing everyone and removing our DNA. How I do actually need to know how these people got there and why they're thinking that, because that's the way we can deconstruct it. That's the way we can actually understand and try to cogently move forward. So to stretch ourselves and to see things from other perspectives and try to understand those other perspectives doesn't mean we need to agree with them, but we do need to understand how they got there. And that will help us find the way forward. This card, the Four of Pentacles, talks about making sure that things are balanced in receiving and giving. Excuse me. One moment, please.
One moment granted.
Thank you. So this is how we, this is the time of harvest. We are into the fall. It is the time of taking that which you've earned, that which you've gained, knowing that you've worked hard and you've had some success, and that's fabulous. And things are best when shared, and things tend to, the material tends to stay flowing when you don't hoard. So protect what's yours. Don't get hornswoggled. Be careful and judicious about how you're spending your resources, but make sure that we are in fact sharing and taking care of each other at the same time. And so that is what I have for this week. We are challenged with things that don't make sense. So let's apply analysis, stay grounded, creative efforts, and good analysis and the flow of the material are all emphasized this week. And that's great. That's really good news.
Well, if you'll be so kind, please hit that like button and the subscribe button. We are, as Ani mentioned, on Twitter, and I think we'll might be shifting from SoundCloud.
I think we probably will be shifting from SoundCloud. There'll be exciting developments in our podcast future for the audio portion of this. But in the meantime, you can find us on SoundCloud. This is now Bridge to a Better World. You can find us on Twitter at Bridge to Utopia. You can also find us on Instagram. This is now Bridge to a Better World. You can also find my website, AniRavenHaines.com, where I write about spiritual things and blog about spiritual things and offer tarot readings and this sort of stuff.
And I've even written some stuff on Medium.
Yeah, we both write on Medium. We'll get a link tree. We'll let you know what we're doing everywhere. We've been busy.
Thanks for the chat comments.
And please do subscribe to our channel. Do hit the like button and comment also on the show below. So thank you so much for joining us. We love you, and we'll be back next week.
We'll be going out to you and to all the ships at sea.